Okay, hey. Well, got the red up. It's ready to come down now. Hey! Oh my goodness! Hi guys! You came back! Whoa! I'm going to take my mask off, okay? But make sure you wear yours and keep your distance from each other. But now I think you can hear me better. What a nice surprise to have you here today. And we're on the road again, and this time we're back to Our Lady of Grace, one of the three parish families. And today we're going to talk a little bit about their grand piano. It has a nice history to it, which I think would be good for us to know, because if we ever come to church here, we'll hear that beautiful piano. So I'm going to come down. Hope I don't fall down. Yeah, I was just looking at the red material, because remember we had red last week in the church because of Palm Sunday, and that'll all be coming down, and then we'll start the Triduum on Thursday morning in our church at Immaculate. We start with morning prayer, and then we go into the evening ceremony. Okay, but before we start with the piano this morning, I think we should do what we usually do, right? We have our little sung prayer, and we kind of put somebody in our hands, somebody who needs some special prayer today. And today we're going to be asking God to put the Collado family. They're wonderful friends of mine from many years ago in my parish in Massachusetts. They have a son, Dion and Chris, who are now grown up. We're going to put the Collado family in our hands as we pray today. Okay? Asking God to put blessing upon them and upon all those that we love. So, He's got the whole world in His hands. 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 He's got the Collado family in His hands. He's got the Collado family in His hands. He's got the Collado family in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. He's got you and me, sister, in His hands. He's got you and me, brother, in His hands. He's got you and me, family, in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. There. We begin with our prayer. What a wonderful way to begin. And so here we are at Our Lady of Grace in Ballston Lake, New York, not too far from Immaculate Conception, our home base. And today we're going to be meeting a very wonderful man that I've got to know a little bit over the months. His name is Tad Darling. And it's interesting how he has the name Tad. His mother thought he looked like a tadpole when he was a baby, and that name stuck with him. So anyway, I'm going to introduce you to Tad. Hello, Tad, and good morning.
Good morning, Father Jerry.
Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you for being with us today.
Yes, and thank you for the invite.
Oh, it's
this
a
wonderful get-together.
Yep, it's
Talk about this beautiful piano here.
Yeah, and talk about Our Lady of Grace and some nice things that help us become a family. You know, we see different things, but we also are very much alike. So, yes. With that in mind, just tell me a little bit about yourself, Tad. And I understand originally you were from Florida.
Yes, we moved up here from Florida.
Who would move from Florida
sit down and make ourselves
to New York? Yeah,
here.
Let's do that. Yeah, so how'd that happen?
Well, that was a big mistake. My parents lived in Connecticut at the time, back in 1958, and they said, too many snow days up here, we're losing work, let's go down to Florida. Oh. And I didn't appreciate that. I wanted to be a geologist. Oh. And in Connecticut, there's lots of rocks and minerals to find. Yeah. And in Florida, there are only two kinds of fossils, and those in the limestone and those that walked on two legs. Oh. And I wasn't a happy camper. But I was 12 years old, and I got over it. Yeah. And so we lived down there for quite a while. And then we moved up here after college. So, yes, I got married shortly before we finished college. We moved up here. That would have been on Valentine's Day, actually, 1974. Oh. And so it was an interesting journey. I'm married to Lee Darling, who you probably met before. Used to work with faith formation classes. And we have three boys, Chad, Wesley, and Jared. They all went into the military after high school, and they all moved back to the area. And that has provided us with 7 grandchildren now. And we're looking at possibly 2 more with 2 foster children that one of my boys are raising, that they may have the opportunity to adopt. We've been in Burnt Hills almost the whole time. Our kids all went to the same schools. In total contrast to me, where I moved about every 2 years, up until the time that I came here.
So what brought you to Our Lady of Grace?
Well, that's kind of a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to shorten it up somewhat. Inside of about 3 years, I went to about 6 different parishes. I was a newly minted Catholic. I did not grow up Catholic. I was a newly minted Catholic shortly before we got married. And what kind of started that, I lived 1 block away from St. Cecilia's Church in Clearwater, Florida. And St. Cecilia's Church was kind of an old-fashioned church. It was very beautiful inside. But the distinctive thing I remember about that is when it was time for church, all the men sat out in their cars, or probably many of them, and the mothers and the children went into the church. And I thought that was really odd. I also thought it was a little disrespectful, but and I saw that I was in Austria one time on a trip, and I saw the same thing out in a country church. All the men went over to the barn, smoked their cigarettes and chat, and the mothers and the children went into the church. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's something with the Catholic Church. But anyway, we got married in that church, as a matter of fact, near our junior year of college. And then we moved up to Gainesville, Florida, where we went to the University of Florida. And each church kind of has its own culture, and I think that theme kind of follows through. In the parish church at the University of Florida was very progressive. Keep in mind, Vatican II had just come through. Churches were kind of opened up to be a little bit more liberal in how they formulated their masses and decorated their churches.
A lot more people involvement, men and women.
Absolutely. So, matter of fact, the priest at the church there at the university, for the recessional song, would typically throw up his vestments and pull out or pick up this chromatic harmonica and play along on the recessional song. I thought that was so cool. And then we would oftentimes have masses outdoors on the college quadrangle. And I remember this one very distinctly. It was time for communion, and the line formed. And here's this co-ed that goes up there receiving communion in her bikini. And I thought, well, that really strikes the culture with this church.
A little bit different from our ladies wearing scarves.
Yes.
So you ended up at here at Our Lady of Grace because the culture here is our music much more contemporary.
Well, I didn't get to come here right at first.
Oh, okay.
No, we rented an apartment in Glenville. I got a job at Capitol, and rented an apartment in Glenville, and we went to Immaculate Conception at first. And Immaculate Conception, there are 2 distinctive things I remember about that. One is the demographics were much different than the college church. And I was in my late 20s at that point, and there were the young families that, the kids were still in high school and grade school, and then there were the older folks that were there, the middle-aged people that were working people, and people in their 20s didn't exist. I thought, well, this is really interesting. I thought, well, maybe this is where Middle America is. The other thing, and this is a funny little story, when it was communion time, and I don't know what it's like today at Immaculate Conception, but at communion time, when half the people would go up to communion, the other half would walk out to the parking lot. And of the half that went up to communion, half of them went out to the parking lot. And I thought, well, that's a little disrespectful. And we would hang around and wait for the parking lot to clear out because you only had the 2 exits on Route 50. Well, one January day, God got even with him, and he sprinkled a little freezing rain out into the parking lot. And so we went out there, usual routine. We went out there a couple minutes after Mass had actually ended, and the cars were twisted every which way out in the parking lot, and nobody was going anywhere very quickly.
There you go.
And I thought, well, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So then, 2 years later, this would have been 1976, we bought a house in Burnt Hills, and we said we should go to the local church. So we came over to the local church. Now, this worship space wasn't built at the time. It was the worship space that you had done a little segment on a couple of weeks ago. We got over here, and there's a sign on the door, building condemned. Oh. And I go, building condemned, really? And it turns out this building was built in 73, the original church. And what had happened was there were structural and drainage issues, and they couldn't use the building right after it was built. So thankfully, Calvary Episcopal Church was offering us the space to have our masses on Sunday. And religious ed was down at the Lutheran Church, Good Shepherd Lutheran Church on Route 50. And that went for probably a year and a half until they got this place restored and were able to come back. When we came back here, we came into this church, and I had mentioned Vatican II a little while ago. This church, when it was built, really reflected some of the changes in Vatican II about simplifying the decorations. There were no kneelers. We sat in chairs, so there were no pews. There were no stained glass. We didn't have any hymnals. It was all very, very kind of interesting and very foreign to us. But there was something about that connection that we liked, the relative informality. One thing I would note is that we have Boston Lake time here, which is different than daylight savings time. And up until COVID struck, people would oftentimes not show up to church until about 5 or 10 after. So it was one of those things, it was just a culture. And every priest that came through here tried to change that, and they just couldn't. So we had Boston Lake time.
I can't change it because I was 15 minutes late last week.
I know, but you have a good excuse. The other thing was, nobody left early. And this is a striking contrast to every other Catholic church I had been in. Nobody left early.
Nice.
And I found out why. I was here one day, and it was communion meditation time. And all of a sudden, Father Finger bolts down from the altar and runs out of the church, and everybody's sitting here like, what is going on? And it turns out there was a couple passing through the area. They weren't Catholic. They got here late. They thought they should go to church, and they get in here and realize that it was a Catholic church. And so they got up and left. So they probably came in at the beginning of communion, and they left very quickly thereafter. He chased them all the way up to the parking lot and counseled them that nobody leaves this church until I do. Whoa. And that word got around very quickly. And to this day, I think you'll see very few people leave the church until the priest is actually left. So you can mess with God, but you didn't mess with Father Finger.
So let's get to the piano. How did that come to be?
Well, it's interesting. Back in, I was here for about 2 years. In 1978, we started what we called the folk group. And the folk group was started by Helen Benedum. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of what we consider today contemporary music. So we played a mix of songs that you heard on the radio that were folk songs, like Morning Has Broken, Turn, 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 which is liturgically based. But there were some composers at that time that were starting to write music. Ray Repp, Joe Wise, St. Louis Jesuits among them. And so that really resonated with the community. We had 2 masses on Sunday. There was the 8:45 and the 10:45. The 8:45 became the folk mass.
Folk mass.
Yeah, and the folk mass or the folk group and the senior choir were all the same average age, and we played basically the same music, but it was presented differently. So we played that kind of music. For instrumentation in the other worship space, We had an upright piano donated by Marguerite Potocny, who was our choir director at the time. And we had a Hammond B3 organ. Now, I don't know if you know what a Hammond B3 organ is, but any major rock and roll group of the 60s or 70s dragged one of these 300-pound units around with them to every performance they did. So if you hear organ music in a rock and roll song, it's from a Hammond B3 organ. They claim that you cannot duplicate that sound. So, but a Hammond B3 organ has vacuum tubes in it. I'll get to that in just a second. But the upright piano we found really wasn't sufficient, and it wasn't mic'd. It really wasn't sufficient to cover a large worship space. Mm-hmm. At that time, we had no idea we were going to be building this sort of a facility. But anyway, the Hammond B3 organ worked on vacuum tubes for the amplification. And when I got involved in music ministry and I had an electrical engineering degree, I was the one chosen to repair it all the time. So I was constantly running down the Veeder and Yelverton drugstore. That was our family drugstore in Burnt Hills. And to buy vacuum tubes. Now, why a drugstore sells vacuum tubes, I don't know. And if you don't know what a vacuum tube is, they're about the size of a chapstick container. And they have a little filament in them that's like a light bulb. And they constantly burn out. So we kept changing these things and finally decided this is ridiculous. So we sold the Hammond B3 organ, which is probably worth a mint today. And a little bit down the road, we decided, well, we probably should still have an organ. So they contracted with a local music store, and they brought in this massive organ, big console thing, beautiful walnut case, had several keyboards on it, and had all the stops on the sides. Anybody that sat behind that organ had total command of the congregation.
Like driving a plane.
Yes. So this was a thing of beauty. It was here for 2 months on a trial basis. And after the 2 months was up, the congregation decided, we really don't like that. It's too imposing, it's too loud, and it just doesn't go with the kind of music that we like to play here. We really like the piano. That is the foundation of our choir. The little side story I wanted to share about vacuum tubes. We oftentimes had masses outdoors. And one day it was the blessing of the pets, St. Francis. And we were out just outside the church right over here. And we had a portable amplifier that worked on vacuum tubes. And vacuum tubes let out a lot of heat, so you have to have the back of the case open. And we set it up with the microphones, and the guitars were out there, and we were good to go. And we're playing along in the mass parts. And then it's time for the blessing of the pets. Now, blessing of the pets was a pretty broad, we had a pretty broad spectrum of animals here. It started off with the horses. We didn't have any cows, but we had lots of goats and sheep. And they got through, and then it was time for the domestic animals. And the line went right past in front of the choir. And so along come the family pets. And we had dogs and cats and Tweety Bird and the whole gang. And here comes the dog. Now, the line wasn't moving very fast, and the dog stops in front of the amplifier. And I said, oh, no, this is not going to be a happy ending. And so dogs do what dogs do, and hiked up its leg, and the whole sound system went down, faded away. We kept on playing, and I thought that dog was going to be dead, electrocuted. Yeah. And pretty soon, the sound system came back up again, and St. Francis saved that dog.
That's good.
So that was really funny. Today, amplification's all solid state.
So let's get to that beautiful piano.
Yes, this is a lovely piano.
Can we stand up maybe around that, Tom?
Yes, we can.
Tom Biggis is with us again, taking the camera to hand. Thank you, Tom.
So, I dropped my microphone here.
I think this is a little bit bigger than the one we have at Immaculate Conception. And you think so, Tom? Or about the same?
I think it is.
It might be a little bit bigger. And I know St. Joseph's has a nice piano, too.
Do they? I have not seen that one yet.
All the churches have pianos, and I myself like the piano sound. I love the piano and organ together, and we do that sometimes at Immaculate, and it will be doing more of that because now we have so many beautiful piano players. So anyway, so how'd you get it? And where's it come from?
Well, like I was saying, we got to the point where we decided that the piano was really the foundation of our music program here for both liturgies, the folk mass and the more traditional mass. And the upright piano didn't project well. When we finally decided we wanted to get a new piano, grand piano, we were also in the process of looking to expand the church. And that's the worship space you see here today. And we knew that the upright just wouldn't serve the purpose. So we decided on a piano. We said, well, if we're going to, our grand piano, we decided if we're going to get a grand piano, we might as well go big on it and get a Steinway. I mean, that's like top of the line. Somehow Yamaha on the side just doesn't cut it. I think of motorcycles all the time. So we decided on the Steinway, and the choir had done a number of programs here to raise money. We had David Haas here, Marty Hagen, Bobby Fisher, Jeannie Cotter, and some others, and we would do these workshops and concerts, and we saved that money aside. And we also did a full production of Tales of Wonder that Marty Hagen had written, and that was in the old church. We had the full stage, and Father Tony was the male lead, and instead of the Hawaiian theme that Marty Hagen had written it for, we did a Native American theme. So he was like the chief, and we had the squaw next to him, and it was very interesting. But we packed the house 2 nights in a row, and that made us around $5,000 or $6,000 alone. So we had saved up around $12,000. Went to Clark Music and said we'd like to purchase a Model B grand piano. And at that time, now this is right around 1994, 95, that cost $45,000. I think today it's more than double that. Yeah. And so I put the package together, went to the parish council at the time, now they're called pastoral councils. Went to the parish council, and the parish council said, $45,000 is just unconscionable to spend on piano. No, go look for a used one. So, okay, so I went back to Clark Music, and Clark Music said, we have a used piano for you that we think you would really like. It's a Steinway, it's a Model B, and it came from the old Van Dyke restaurant. Oh. And the Van Dyke restaurant down in the Stockade was famous for bringing in these famous jazz musicians. And I said, boy, that would really be cool to get that. So this is 6 months later now. I go back to the parish council, and I gave them a proposal. I said, you asked me to find a used piano. I have found one. It's $25,000. It will be completely rebuilt and refinished. And they went, ugh. They said, that's unconscionable to spend that kind of money when there's poor and needy in the community. And I'm really concerned that we're starting a fundraiser to build the new worship space here that's going to impact that. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I was very dejected. I came back out, told the choir the next practice, this is what happened. They were saddened by it. And then one day after Mass, I'm walking up in our, back up in our lounge area we had at the time. Everybody hung around after Mass back then. We had treats and coffee and stuff for people. And Rudy Slavacek, who was an old-time member of our choir in this parish, came up to me and he said, Tad, he said, I will pay for the other half of that piano. And I said, you really? I said, that's just beautiful, Rudy. Great gift, yeah. I said, I never had anybody make that kind of an offer to me, but it meant that much to him, and it was in memory of his wife. Yeah. So I called Rudy back up after lunch, and I said, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. And he said, yep, I'll pay the other half of that. And I called up Father Tony at the rectory immediately, and I said, Rudy Slavacek has offered to pay for the other half of the piano. We have enough money to buy it. And I said, you know, if we turn Rudy down, you might impact that fundraiser you want to do for the parish here, because he's very good friends with all those other people that will probably be donating, and they'll be upset that that got turned down. 2 seconds later, Tony says, we're buying the piano. And he loved music anyway. I mean, he used to sing all the way through the Mass sometimes for us. And so I called up Clark Music. They sent it out for refurbishment, and several months later, we finally got the piano. We had a wonderful dedication ceremony for it, very formal. Everybody dressed up for it, and some of Rudy's family members actually composed classical music to play on it. That's kind of how we got it, but we almost didn't get it.
Yeah, you were
almost
saying.
didn't get it.
What happened?
So, I think it was Rudy coming up and saying, "Hey, I'll support that." It was the right.
I see.
It was the right thing to do.
You almost didn't get it, but he helped.
Yeah,
he got you the piano.
It's the right thing to do.
I had an interesting story one time too at my parish in Clinton Heights. A woman from Florida would come up every winter for a little while, or in the summer to see her family, and we were looking for a piano. Well, we were looking for an electric piano at the time, and out of the blue, she just said, "Get the piano, I'll take care of it." It was like $10,000, So always these wonderful surprises that God sends our way. So we heard a lot about the piano. I think it's probably time we listen to that piano, and Rachel's going to be with us today.
Yes, I thought just before Rachel starts, I'd like to introduce our Phantom Ensemble here.
Oh, okay.
Just to recognize them. We have Patty Newman, who's our choir director, and she's been here since around 1995. She came just as we were doing the Tales of Wonder performance. She plays a 12-string guitar. I play a 12-string and a 6-string guitar. And also, rarely, I'll bring in a hammered dulcimer and play that. I've even played a mountain dulcimer here, too, before. Bob Dentrone plays acoustic and electric bass and also plays percussion occasionally. We have Rhonda Poirier, who plays the flute. And for pianists, we have Joan Suda, who's been here quite a while. And we have Rachel right here, who's been here with us about 13 years now and hails from Bristol, England.
Yes.
So
I'm going to just sneak over here, Rachel, for a second to say hello to you. And you're going to be playing for us Panis Angelicus, which is a very, very ancient piece in the church, and a beautiful piece, meaning the bread of angels. And Jesus in the Eucharist is often referred to as the bread of angels. And it's so appropriate you're going to play that for us today, because on Thursday we celebrate the Last Supper, the institution of the Eucharist, when Jesus gives us his body and blood in the form of bread and wine. And so we have that wonderful bread, the bread of the angels, to feed us forever. So with that in mind, we're delighted to hear you play. Tad, thank you very much for all that information on it.
You're welcome.
I think we'll probably conclude with you playing. And it's been great being here and learning a little bit more about the piano. So when I come to celebrate Mass here, I have a little more background now and a greater appreciation for this beautiful piece of art and really an instrument of God's beauty, I think, through music. So, Rachel, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Father Jerry.
Okay.
Thank you, Tad.
welcome.
Yeah, really beautiful piano.
And a beautiful player.
Oh, thank you.
as Rachel finishes the piece, I'm going to just say thank you for being with us today. Tom, thanks for helping us today. Tad, nice having you with us. Rachel, an honor to be with you. And remember, have a good week. I hope you'll get to church if you can this week. Holy Week, make it special. Wonderful things are going to be happening for us in the church. And until next time we meet, remember that I love you dearly, and I thank you for tuning in and keeping in tune with us at the church.